So hello, everybody out here in IoT world. Thank you so much for taking the time on the last day and a half. It's been an incredible couple of days and listening to some of the expertise talk about cybersecurity as it relates to the manufacturing and industrial base. And for this keynote, we're thrilled to be able to have folks join us for this keynote, a fireside chat. I'll get to Steve Kelly here in a minute. My name is Lucia Niemeyer. I'll be serving as a moderator for this, and I am currently the CEO of a nonprofit called Building Cybersecurity, for which IoT World is a strong supporter. And our goal as a nonprofit is to develop frameworks to make the world a safer place, for lack of a better word. But it's not about building cybersecurity right now. It's more about who I have with me today as a guest speaker for this keynote address. And here's the reason why this would be important to everybody on the call in the audience. The President of the United States recently released the National Cybersecurity Strategy to advance cybersecurity efforts spanning national security programs and critical infrastructure. And that's the key, as well as everyday consumer IoT products. Now the strategy is in place, a lot of folks around the country are asking, now what? What are the tangible next steps to reduce risk? I am proud to be joined by Mr. Steve Kelly, who will talk about not only where we're at today, where we need to be moving in the future within the current landscape, geopolitics, and what do we need to look forward to as far as administration policies to make the strategy a tangible reality. So Steve, welcome. Let me give you the audience a little bit of background about Steve Kelly. First of all, he currently serves on the National Security Council staff as a senior director, where he takes on cyber and emerging technology related national security programs and issues. This is his second tour. Congratulations on National Security Council tour. He served there in 2013 to 2015. In his day job, which is easy to detail to National Security Council, he's a special agent on detail from the FBI, where he served more than 21 years in cyber-related roles and in field and headquarters level. His original career, which I'm so proud to have been joined by a fellow engineer, was engineering. He practiced as a registered professional engineer in the 90s before joining the Bureau. So Steve, I noticed that background. You're actually calling in from the White House grounds, which is fantastic. And I'll turn it over to you for any opening comments.
Great, thanks, Lucian. It's a pleasure to be here and to be able to speak about this important topic. Can you have a thumbs up on audio?
You're good. Gotcha.
Right. Just don't see my thing lighting up. So yeah, I'm coming to you from the Eisenhower Executive Office Building, which is on the 18 acres, as we call the White House complex. I'd like to actually start off with a story that takes us back to the immediate aftermath of the Civil War, which kind of brings this building into relevance. This was built between 1871 and the early 1880s. And I'm actually coming to you from the Secretary of War Suite. So this was the old offices of the Secretary of Defense back when it was called the Department of War. And so it's a beautiful, beautiful building, and a lot of interesting things were happening in the country at that time. And taking us back to the aftermath of the Civil War, it was a bit of a second industrial revolution. And at the time, safe design of the modern boiler were actually still being figured out. And during that time, boiler explosions were happening quite frequently with a lot of property damage, injuries, and deaths occurring. And so one example of that is in 1865, there was a steamboat called Sultana, which was jammed with 2,200 mostly Union soldiers that had been released from Confederate prison camps. And her boilers exploded, 1,200 people died, and actually that still marks the nation's worst marine disaster even to this day. And so in the aftermath of that, and of course, lots of issues that were happening within both buildings and industry with regards to boilers, we started to see some developments in safety, design, and operational practices. And so the question is, who drove those improvements? Where did those come from? Was it government mandates? The answer is no. That was actually insurance companies started to engage and to attack this problem because it was hitting their bottom line. And so they developed inspection policies for the insured and were helping to prevent claims by being very engaged. And it took about 4 more decades before the government got involved. It was the state of Massachusetts that was the first state to adopt boiler safety standards into code, quickly followed by others. But even today, it remains a practice that insurance companies, and for instance, Factory Mutual, which is one of those original ones right after the Civil War, do boiler machinery safety inspections. They file reports with state regulators on behalf of their insureds. And so that is kind of like the original public-private partnership, where there's a lot of engagement by those who hold the risk, and the public safety is achieved. And up to this point, boilers are still all over the place, including my basement. We've got an older home, and we have radiant heat, works fantastic, and you don't hear a lot in the news about boiler explosions. So it's working. So how does that have anything whatsoever to do with cybersecurity? Well, fast forward to today, I feel like we're having a pandemic of ransomware attacks impacting real-world operations, energy infrastructure, food processing, hospitals, schools, government agencies, industry. Beyond that, bad actors are infiltrating and co-opting our routers, our IoT devices, exploiting our software, manipulating the internet's underlying protocols to reroute and spy on traffic. And I think Americans have become numb to their information being repeatedly exposed in data breaches. And I don't know how many letters you've received or pop-ups or alerts you've received, but I think our information's been exposed about 100 times over. And so I think we're kind of numb to this. But how do we attack this problem? I don't think we attack it at a level where we're asking end users to be able to figure out how to use all this technology in a safe and secure way, any more than you'd expect a homeowner to know how to operate an unsafe boiler in a safe way. It's just not possible. So we need to start attacking this at the ecosystem level so that all the pieces and parts, cloud services, IoT devices, everything from soup to nuts, that we are building safety and security by design into these, and that the ecosystem itself is protecting the end user and is self-healing to the extent that it can be.
Yeah, Steve, I think you've hit upon so much there. We could easily spend more than a half hour. So my concern as well is we can't wait for a catastrophic incident like what you mentioned with the boiler explosion. And I know you've committed your life over the last couple of years. How do we incentivize infrastructure owners, because most of it's owned by the private sector, to get after this? We are adopting technology at a rapid rate. Technologies all around us in our homes and our devices. And I think that's really what you were trying to do with the strategy, is get folks to think proactively about critical infrastructure. What would you like to see as the next step now that you've got the strategy in place to get folks really thinking about, hey, this is a risk. This could potentially be a huge problem, an explosion or some of the loss of life. What can we proactively do today to get folks to start to invest in risk mitigations?
Yeah, well, so it's a key theme. I haven't talked about the cybersecurity strategy yet, but it's a key theme in this strategy that's repeated over and over of this idea that we need to be placing responsibility for safety and security in cyberspace on the actors within the ecosystem that are most capable of building those safeguards in. I think early on, the National Cyber Director at the time, Chris Inglis, was kind of oftentimes used the term kind of this social compact. So that theme is driven throughout, and that there's some items in the National Cyber Strategy that are very tangible, and they're in progress, and we're going to have results very soon. And there's some of these things that are longer term conversations, like what should be a minimum security posture and offering in cloud services, and things around software liability, liability for bad things happening and for weaknesses within software products. Longer term conversations, somewhat controversial, but there are a number of things that we can start to tackle, which are outlined in the strategy. So ultimately, the main theme is we've got to level up. And so we need to be talking to the internet service providers and the product manufacturers, the software makers, to be able to build these programs and this posture into the products. There's a number of things that I can tick off that are focuses of ours right now. And one of them on the telecom side is that we're very concerned about supply chain risks of risky foreign products in our cellular communication networks. For instance, And so we're hoping that nations around the world, as they're offering tenders to build more infrastructure, that they're looking to trusted suppliers and not suppliers from threat countries, where the equipment manufacturers are essentially arms of that country, and certainly provide a posture for the foreign intelligence services and militaries of those countries to co-opt it. And so as a result of that, because the cost of that kind of equipment is so high, we're pushing for this open radio access network approach, where we can increase vendor diversity, get more players into the ecosystem, and then have stacks of for instance, 5G, 6G equipment, which is interoperable, and we can get more folks involved, and security is built in, and folks have more options to be able to buy safe and secure products. On the consumer IoT side, and then that kind of moves us into industrial IoT as well. We've been working for quite some time, and had spoken in October around having and launching a consumer IoT security labeling program to help consumers make better choices. When you go on Amazon and buy an IoT product, sometimes there's brand names you've never heard of, and just like, is it secure? Is it not? What does that device do? I'm bringing it into my home, and so we need to have better ways to help consumers make more informed choices, and to have some accepted security baselines that we're building these products to. And so that's a piece of work that we will be rolling out very soon. I'll tick through a couple others. We're also planning for a world in which a quantum relevant computer gets invented. And when that happens, all of the encryption that we're currently using is at risk. And so the information you think is private and protected may not be in the future. So we need to move very quickly to make sure that we've implemented quantum resistant cryptography. And that's not just a government imperative. Companies and individuals have privacy needs as well. And of course, on the cloud security side, making sure that there's good default settings. So when a user is using a cloud service, that all the right switches and features are turned on to make sure that is as secure as it possibly can be. And then, one other thing to mention, since we kind of led off with the idea that the insurance industry is a major driver for improvements, because the incentives are entirely aligned. Money is the bottom line. There's a proposal within the cyber strategy to consider an insurance backstop, kind of like the Terrorism Risk Insurance Act created a backstop for insurance claims related to attacks of terrorism. We want to make sure that there's a robust cyber insurance industry, and considering a backstop to make sure that if there's some sort of catastrophic issue that affects broad swaths of stakeholders, and that there are massive losses, that we don't lose the insurance industry, which is going to be an essential driver of improved cybersecurity practices. So those are just a few.
Yep. So one of the things I found compelling about the strategy, and by the way, I do recommend anybody in the audience to take a moment to go ahead and read that cybersecurity strategy released in March of this year, is the idea of secure by design. Now, I realized for the most part, the strategy was talking about secure by design in the software. But I think, Steve, you and I have been talking about secure by design for infrastructure, for devices. What can we do to drive those design standards? We've talked about, you and I in the prep call, talked about what the need for design standard change. How far to the left do we need to drive cyber safety and cybersecurity requirements to truly be effective, and not relying on end users to have to figure out a way to bolt something up? Any thoughts or impressions on our next steps there?
Yeah. So for the consumer side, and the model applies broadly. We can start to walk that to the left into the industrial context, but we'll start there. A whole bunch of work actually started even in the Trump administration with an executive order that he signed that got NIST working on baseline security requirements for consumer IoT. And so NIST does their normal thing where they pull together stakeholders and take feedback and come up with something. So they came up with NIST Internal Report 8425, which sets forth kind of what is the baseline for kind of your average run-of-the-mill consumer IoT product. And so we're building this consumer IoT labeling program on the foundation of that. And that covers not just the device itself, like if you have a smart speaker in the home, it also has elements for the whole product, The product would include, perhaps there's some data being collected by the device and that goes into the cloud. So we need to be protecting that. And then maybe there's an app on your phone that controls the device as well, and that needs to be protected. So both the cloud and the app and the device itself are part of that product ecosystem, and we need to be attacking the whole thing. And so we will be building a conformity assessment program around the average consumer IoT product. But recognizing that there's products out there that are higher risk, and one still household and small office device that comes to mind is your router. So we need to be protecting routers because we've seen in incidents and in our intelligence that routers can be manipulated and they can certainly become part of the attack surface. We need to be protecting those, and there's additional things we may want to include beyond the NIST 8425 requirements, like maybe a hardware boot of trust. We need to be looking at product categories, starting with the everyday and moving our way into things that are in more high-risk environments. And so, I know that there's a lot of work by Lucian, your organization, and others around conformity assessment of industrial IoT and things that go into building automation, for instance. And so we're going to be also poking at that topic, but as just a kind of a fundamental philosophy matter, we're not intending as the U.S. government to reinvent the wheel. Where there are industry efforts that are already moving down this path, we want to take advantage of that and elevate that. And if it helps to be able to have a government program that kind of, with a government mark, your good housekeeping seal of approval, that gets associated with a conformity assessment program that exists in the industry, we can get ourselves aligned. That's a great way to do it. And that's in fact how we intend to do it for the consumer side, is to license one or more organizations that can be the labeling authority on the government's behalf. And then we just kind of keep track and make sure everything's running correctly. And then that helps us also to talk to other countries. We want to make sure that U.S. products are accepted and marketable across the world, and that our mark is accepted over there. And at the same time, there are labeling programs happening in other countries, and to where our efforts align, we want to have mutual recognition and to make our marketplace open to them. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity to harness the work that's already been happening for years in industry, and to be able to kind of unify it to the extent that we can. And the industrial side is going to be a kind of a bit of a next step for us, where I think we're going to be starting mainly on the consumer side.
Yeah, I appreciate that very much. And by the way, I completely agree. I think the private sector does have good ideas out there, particularly when it comes to frameworks and standards that that are either government derived but industry adopted and industry interpreted. And I do appreciate recognizing the work that our nonprofit has done in the real estate space and in the facility space to take some of those standards and map them away for which it's easy for anybody to use. And really do appreciate the collaboration from the White House with the private sector on looking at those and seeing where we can work together on implementation. So a quick question as far as what next? What would you like to see? As far as continued private sector engagement, but what would you like to see as far as taking some of the more critical aspects of the strategy as it applies to critical infrastructure? And that's the key, I think, for us. Yes, software, understand the concerns there and need potentially for federal regulation. What would you recommend or want to see on the critical infrastructure side if you were talking to their owners as far as what we do with risk? My concern here is we have three things we do with risk. We either mitigate it, we transfer it, or we assume it. I'm not sure we can assume risk in cyber when it comes to critical infrastructure. Transferring is mainly a post-incident. So what do we do to mitigate? What are your thoughts there, Steve?
Yeah, well, a couple things. This is such a hard problem, and
I know I'm only asking the hard stuff. That's where you're tough.
The challenge is that there is. Well, let me just start with this. So it is no secret, and it was certainly we were being fairly quite transparent in the strategy that this administration intends to require, and it is our intent to regulate cybersecurity standards into critical infrastructure. And that's kind of a first time that message has come across. Up to this point, for the last couple of generations, it's always been discussions around the voluntary approach. And this cybersecurity framework, which came out of an Obama executive order, kind of establish approaches for how to attack that. And in many cases, critical infrastructure owners and operators would take a voluntary approach to start to build their cybersecurity posture. And of course, there's certain industries that are regulated, like electricity, for instance. And so a very clear signal from this strategy is the voluntary approach in many cases hasn't worked, and we've seen the results of that. And certainly in terms of the threat, it's no longer an information security issue. We're not worried just about espionage and fraud. We are worried about bad actors, and in some cases, foreign militaries and intelligence services that may desire to hold our infrastructure at risk to be used in a contingency. And of course, folks may have noticed fairly recently, the CIA director announced publicly that as a matter of intelligence, President Xi Jinping had directed the People's Liberation Army to be prepared to engage in a Taiwan conflict by 2027. And so certainly the stage is set for conflict. We saw how cyber operations were used in a traditional conflict with Russia and Ukraine. And so, when things get tricky, cyberspace operations will be part of the action, and we need to make sure that our critical infrastructure is ready to withstand that. You noticed recently the Environmental Protection Agency, which is the regulator for the drinking water and wastewater sector, put out a new interpretation of the rule requiring cybersecurity be incorporated into the regular audits of drinking water facilities. It's called the Sanitary Survey Program. And that caught some folks off guard, and they're wondering, well, how are we going to do this? And this is kind of a key point, that this cybersecurity expertise doesn't exist within the water sector in many cases. You've got a lot of very small and rural owners and operators, and where are they going to get that? How are they going to do that? And so I think we're going to need to see the private sector and the cybersecurity firms and the companies that can engage and help, to be rising to the challenge, we almost need a national call of action because there's more entities that need help than there is skilled expertise for them to hire CISOs into their workforce. I don't think there's that many people out there, and frankly, the money isn't out there. Many of these entities can't afford to hire cybersecurity staff, but in many cases, they don't need to. I think that there are service providers, there's business opportunities to be had to be able to provide these services at scale. And in a lot of cases, the cyber defense work and even incident response work is done remotely now by the major firms. So there's a huge opportunity there. But we definitely have to clean up our networks. We need to be radically rethinking about how we protect an industrial concern or a critical infrastructure owner and operator, addressing shadow IT. Does an employee need to be able to surf the internet from the control station? No, terrible idea. So we need as much as possible to almost go back to the old school way. For government systems that are highly sensitive, they're air gapped or virtually air gapped, where you can't get from here to there. It's just not there. And I think for the holy of holies, we really need to be building better moats and fences and blocking services and such that do not need to be there because the risk is incredible.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I'm headed too, is that yes, insurance is a good incentive into mitigations. I think what you're going to ultimately see is companies realize they just can't afford the transfer of risk anymore. They've got to use, in some cases, be forced by their insurers to invest in those types of sensors, those types of physical infrastructure, warning systems that I think we need. It's pretty amazing today. We have cars with over 2,000 microchips in them, and yet we don't have a dashboard light that says, hey, pull over. Someone's messing with the data in your car and could create an unsafe condition. So there's no doubt we have a long way to go to protect not just the software, make it more secure, make the systems more secure, but also enhance the warning system between humans and machines to say if something's about to happen here, you need to either get away or shut it down. We have a lot of questions coming into Q&A, and I'm going to try to get to a couple of them that I think are really pertinent. And we only have maybe 7 minutes left, so you just want to give you an idea on the clock. So we did have a good question coming in about AI, artificial intelligence, particularly as it applies either as a force for good or as what I recently opined in a national engagement, could be the source of our destruction, depending on how it's managed and controlled. When it comes to AI, I definitely see its benefits to society for critical infrastructure and operational technologies, but I also see a potential risk. Can you talk a little bit about what you believe from a government perspective? And I know this is off the track from what we discussed, but give your just thoughts of where do you think as a government we need to go when it comes to AI and its relationship to OT and critical infrastructure?
Yeah, it's a very timely question, and that topic is very much being deliberated at this very moment. And the AI topic does span broadly across issues and concerns in terms of what both the opportunities and the risks. AI promises to bring efficiency into critical infrastructure operations, but at the same time, on the cyber defense side and the cyber offense side, it can perhaps allow a bad actor to be more effective in their attack capabilities, and at the same time, we can use AI and machine learning to be better on the defense. So it is right now a bit of an arms race, and so we are actively studying these topics, and as it seems like this topic kind of burst forth with ChatGPT being available to the public to play with, and all of a sudden people are realizing what it can do. But that's a fascinating topic. A lot of brain power is being put into that right now. Industry consultations and work around, what might be the ways that we need to manage the risk associated with this. So I don't have a lot more to say, but at the critical infrastructure context, both on the efficiency side and operations side, and the offense defense piece is very present.
Yeah, no, I didn't mean to put you on the spot there, and I know trust me, I know there's a lot going on in that Security Council when it comes to that. I think for me, it just drives the question, when you're looking at mitigations, do you mitigate what you believe would be the input into the technology, the machine, or do you potentially create some type of sensor to at least warn people, hey, something bad is happening, and either shut the system down? So where you put that mitigation, either to reduce that vector coming in or reduce the effect of that vector, I think that's where AI might drive it more towards, in that human machine interface. What can we do to protect that human from being affected by that OT or that machine? And because it's going to be moving so fast, AI, really what it does is allow vectors to expand and move so much more quickly. What I mean by vectors, attack vectors, that we could actually possibly keep up with. So we got to catch it on the tail end. Another question coming in, I was trying to figure out how best to pass this on, but it has to do with the digital material and objects, and whether there is a discussion about a regulated or regulatory regime around certifications and standards of digital media and objects to authenticate them. I definitely see that value. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. I just wanted to make sure I got that question to you for an opportunity to provide an answer.
Yeah, and frankly, that kind of is a good carry along from the AI discussion. As soon as you have generative AI able to create content, and a human is not able to distinguish as to whether it's authentic or not, it creates huge challenges. That's one of the side topics, or not side topic. It's one of the included topics of the AI discussion, which is content authenticity. And also, how do we make sure that the public, when for instance, the government puts out a report or a piece or a news release or whatever it is that we're doing, how do we make sure that it is marked in a way that people can trust that, okay, that's authentic, versus something that may have been faked? So the whole idea of fake news is this is becoming real. And that is definitely an included topic of the AI opportunities and risks conversation.
Yeah. So we have only time for a couple more, for actually your last thoughts. Before I do that, for anybody in the audience, I've been tracking both chat and Q&A. IoT World maintains a record of that. So if there are questions you would like to pass on to Steve and I, either through chat or the Q&A, with an email address, we'll get back to you. But Steve, I really just want to offer you some last thoughts about what we need to take this strategy on behalf of the president and make it a reality. And anything to close us out with?
Well, the main thing is that each of us has a role in that, and the work by people throughout the ecosystem if your organization can participate in industry groups that are doing standards work, conformity assessment programs, building this stuff and shaping the future, please engage. And on the standards side, especially international standards, we need to scale. We need to make sure that the U.S. is heard, our academic institutions, our companies that we are engaging, because folks like the People's Republic of China, they're flooding the zone. And so we need to make sure that our ideas, that we have a voice in those standards bodies, because that is a very influential space, and it takes a lot of effort to do that. So please stay engaged and please contribute.
Okay, that's great. And Steve, I do appreciate it. For those of you who would like to talk to Steve, I put my email address in the chat. I can get to Steve. So if there's anybody on the call who would like to respond to his desire to want to engage, that's great. By the way, Steve and I, we work for fives. That would be an outstanding on your survey. So for those of you who are filling out, that's always our go-to. I want to thank Steve Kelly more for your public service. I know it's a thankless job, but I do appreciate you taking some time today to talk about what you're working on behalf of the United States. And thank you again for your time today.